Well, I don't know about you, Alex, but as a writer here and kind of just as a professional writer in general, I basically just get assigned tasks and then knock them out and move on to the next one. I was trying to think of the last time I made something, whether it was writing or otherwise, for fun or for, art's sake. What about you? When was the last time you did something fun?
Oof, it'd be a long time, I think. Probably when I was in college, I think I was doing a lot more creatively driven projects. Not that, you stop thinking creatively specifically, but it's just,
yeah, sure.
You evolve that.
Yeah, about half my degree in writing was focused on creative writing. I mean, we had our professional side of things, of business writing articles and learning those different things, but a lot of it was on creative writing, these more artsy projects with explore this type of figurative language, or maybe step outside the box that you normally write in, which for me, I remember a couple of projects that were write an action sequence or write a ghost story, and both of those assignments I remember being truly terrible.
Yeah, and I remember a terrible kind of assignment for myself as well. It was we had to do these plans books for my advertising club. We had to not only design the full book, write all the copy for it, but we had to assemble top to bottom strategy for it as well. It was quite the journey, I'd say.
That's intense.
To get that book completed.
Yeah, that reminds me of we had a project, I think it was our sophomore year, where we broke out into teams of about 5, and one of us, basically just the expectation was that 28% of our class, which was about 30 people or so, had already written a book and just had a book laying around. These are college sophomores, keep in mind. And so the idea was that you take that author's book and that each other person on the team is like a publicist, a designer for the cover art, a book tour manager, and it was called the book project, and it might have been a full year of that was our main class, was the book project, and that was a nightmare.
Yeah,
it was eye-opening
intense.
for sure, and it was intense, but it taught you a lot about the publishing industry. But basically everybody came out of sophomore year just kind of dazed and confused.
Yeah, I see how one might walk away that feeling like that. So
I think we lost some people after that year in our program.
Well, as one former artist to another, I'm excited to talk to some real creative professionals today. Let's get into it.
Welcome to the Limelight podcast, your source for medical marketing news. Get insights into the latest trends, learn about groundbreaking marketing strategies, and discover the newest tools. We'll let you know what questions you should be asking and where to find the answers. All this and more brought to you by the team at Digital Limelight Media.
We're excited to bring back Josh Koepke today to talk about design principles and best practices. Josh has been conducting training with the newer members of the design team over the last year, and we're excited for him to share some of that knowledge with us today. Josh, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me back.
So, what is something that sets apart amateur designer versus professional designer, specifically graphic design, which is your discipline?
I would say at its core, it's the use of design principles. The tools we use to encourage specific action, right?
Mm-hmm.
To our desired communication goal, We'll cover, the bullet points that are, very high level or sort of umbrella type principles, that just tools that the designer uses, I think it's good for someone from the outside looking in. As a designer, you're like, well, yeah, I've been hearing about these since day one, but it's a great reminder.
And let's just get right into that. What are some of the key design principles that you would teach a new employee or just somebody who's getting started in graphic design?
Some of those key design principles are flow, hierarchy, and repetition.
We're talking about flow in, let's say, a print piece. How would you judge that or assess that?
With flow, we want to lead the viewer's eyes. We want to use movement and direction, leading the eye from one part of a composition to another in the direction that we desire, whether it's from a headline through body copy to a call to action being a phone number.
The next thing you mentioned was hierarchy, and I know it's an important part of web design and SEO, frankly, best practices when it comes to writing and optimizing content. So how do you see hierarchy playing a role in your work and in your day-to-day tasks?
Hierarchy is huge. I would say I almost start with defining hierarchy. It's showing the importance of a design's content using size, color, perspective, and sometimes style. We try to do this by showing the user sort of, if you were to read this in a bulleted list style, you would get a headline, the second most important role or information being like an event date or details that is the most important or second most important. And then we get into how do they contact or what is the action we require or desire the user to make.
The other thing you mentioned was repetition. How do you balance the idea of reinforcing information through that hierarchy we were just talking about without overwhelming people at the same time? What sort of things would you repeat in a design project?
Yeah, the idea is to reinforce that concept. So through repetition and a subtle approach, you can illustrate to the user a concept or an idea that is tied to brand versus seeing the same element over and over in a non-purposeful way. And some of those things that you can repeat are, visual elements, whether it's related to or similar enough to the logo mark, shape in that way, ideas, concepts, and color.
Well, I always love talking design, seeing the parallels between how I write and how you design things. And I'm excited to keep talking to you, Josh. We'll be back after this quick break.
Uh-oh, someone just left a 1-star review for your practice. How do you respond? With DLM Review, we've created a reputation management software that helps you collect positive reviews, reduce and respond to negative comments, and display your best reviews live on your social media or website. Ready to get that 5-star status? Contact the team at DLM today by emailing info@dlmconversion.com. That's info@dlmconversion.com.
We're back with our senior designer, Josh Koepke, talking about the core principles of design and what sets a great designer apart. What else do you want to share with us, Josh?
Yeah, two of them I'd like to highlight are contrast and balance.
All right, so let's start with contrast. What is it? Why is it important?
Definitively, contrast is using color, texture, visual appearance, etc., to create a variety in graphic elements. This increases interest and drama in a piece.
This might relate to our conversation earlier about repetition, but could you tell us a little bit more about balance as well?
Balance is symmetrical or asymmetrical. You want to align the elements following a grid to create a singular visual harmony.
So when you say it can be symmetrical or asymmetrical, but still be balanced, describe that as best you can without having to use the visuals. I think people understand what symmetrical balance is. If it's on the left, it's also on the right, for instance. But you can also have asymmetrical balance. So what does that look like?
Asymmetrical balance is a somewhat uncomfortable layout that creates a pressure from one side to the next. So if something is heavier on one side and lighter on another, the user's eye or sort of their experience will sort of lean to one end of the layout. Specific information or details on that side, because we're using that white space, that empty, uncomfortable area to force the layout's weight to be on one side. So our balance is tipping, but we do that in a way to highlight specific information, graphics, a logo per se.
Sure. I like that you use the terms heavy and light. I think that's actually a really tangible way to think about a graphic design. I think people understand subconsciously as they look at let's say a website, a web page, that it's not necessarily just one column. It's not a page that is just unified. It's just text across the page. There might be 2/3 of the page is text, and there might be a sidebar. And that's an example of like, well, it's quote unquote heavier on the left because there's this bigger space. There's more things happening. But the right is balancing it because there are more important things happening over here. So it's heavier in a sense on one side, but it's also important to maintain this balance between asymmetrical parts of the page. That's really great. So tell us more. What do you think about when you think about principles, design best practices? Just if you would kind of rattle off some of the things that you think through as you start a project.
We also look at things such as emphasis, alignment, Gestalt, which is a German term for unity, proportion, proximity, movement, and white space, as I mentioned before.
All right, so why don't you pick one of those and kind of highlight that for us?
I'd like to highlight Gestalt or unity. I feel like this particular item is the quintessential goal of what a designer is attempting to achieve in a solution. This creates a piece that is cohesive, that feels like one, while creating focal points that in a website design would lead a user's eye to something, most importantly, the call to action, whether it's a phone number, a button to request a consultation, without making that button seem out of place, right? So it's easy to access, but it's part of one layout that serves a purpose, and it's one part to the others.
Yeah, I'm really glad you mentioned Gestalt. I think it's a very unique component of philosophy, and there's one kind of easy simplification that I've heard for that term, and it's like the sum of all parts is greater than the whole. And I think when I think of design specifically, you're scrutinizing every single individual element to maximize its potential in harmony in relation to the other elements that it's surrounded by to make it all cohesive. And I think that's kind of what they're trying to define with that philosophy, and what designers are tasked with is that it's all got to speak to each other, because if there's parts of it that detract from other parts of it that isn't speaking that same relational language, then it creates a lot of mix-up and not good things to be seen, and people make wrong decisions on pages or misread things. Miscommunication can happen.
Yeah, I'd say worst case scenario, we lose the user. They become overwhelmed. They don't quite understand the layout, or they're not interpreting it as intended, and they simply leave the page and go somewhere else.
Well, I think we do a lot to work against that, and that's I guess one balance or benefit of DLM and the designers we have, as you guys approach all of our design problems with that philosophy in mind.
Of course.
Josh, thanks so much for taking the time to talk with us today. I love talking about design, and it sounds like there's a lot more to talk about in the future, so I hope you will come back and join us for another episode later on.
Of course, yeah. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me in the cast.
All right, Josh, thanks so much for taking the time to talk with us today. I love talking about design with you and with Alex, and there's so much more we can talk about. So thanks again, and hope we can have you on a future episode.
I appreciate it very much. I'll be back. Thanks for having me on the cast.
As with all of our services here at DLM, you can learn more from our experts by contacting us at info@dlmconversion.com. That's info@dlmconversion.com.
We're going to take a quick ad break, and then we'll be joined by our lead videographer and podcast producer, Andrew Prime, to talk about why video is an important part of your marketing strategy. If you're looking for a better way to capture leads and make a personal connection with potential patients, Digital Limelight Media has a revolutionary tool for you. Our marketing experts have developed Iris Text AI, an online tool that connects your staff to website leads through text rather than emails, fostering a closer relationship with increased conversion rates. Learn more about Iris Text AI by emailing us at info@dlmconversion.com. That's info@dlmconversion.com. Andrew, you've been here behind the scenes for each episode, and your voice has popped up periodically on the podcast. It's exciting to have you here as a full-on guest.
Thanks, Alex. As you mentioned, I usually direct these episodes from behind the scenes. It's a bit different to be in the hot seat.
All right, we'll cue the intense hot seat musical transition you want to add in post, and let's get into it.
All right, so why is it so important to consider video as part of your marketing strategy?
Video is an important part of marketing strategies because more than 82% of all internet traffic is video. And it works too. 88% of people say that they've been convinced to buy a product or service by watching a brand's video. There are also lots of different video first platforms and platforms that allow for video posting, so there are many different ways you can distribute your video after it is made. Several studies have also shown recently that people are twice as likely to share video content with their friends than any other type of content. That includes other kinds of social media posts, blog posts, articles, and even product pages. So with numbers like these, it's really a no-brainer that video is an important part of a good marketing strategy.
So I'm aware of basically like the good numbers that you want to see for SEO, for a page, like you just mentioned, for writing, for words, but I don't have a lot of experience for video metrics. So how do you measure success for video projects or video campaigns?
Yeah, so there are lots of different ways to measure success depending on what your goal is in terms of raising awareness or converting viewers into leads. Across the board, however, I find that video engagement is measured as a percent of the video watched or a percent of the people who completed your video is a good way to go. I really like to see videos meet approximately that 50% threshold that you've just posted to different platforms like Facebook or YouTube. And if we're talking about ads, I like to see it exceed about 40%. This means that a high percentage of the people watching the video have completed it, which in turn means that the content and style are good. If we're getting low engagement, it means that we need to revisit how the video is being presented, maybe shorten the length of the video to retain viewership or update the opening slides.
I've been involved with a lot of video projects at DLM. A lot of work goes into creating good video ads specifically. Why would you want to run those versus a traditional image ad or a text-based ad?
Yeah, so while video production can take more time and effort and planning than a single photo or some text, the return on investment can also be higher. In a recent case study run by DLM, we found that Facebook ads that feature a video were 5 times more effective to bring in new leads for medical practices than just an image. We also found that video delivered a 20% higher recall on Facebook ads versus image-based ads. Video also lets us run ads on some platforms that are video first, such as YouTube, which is one of the biggest search engines and is an important place to be in order to meet people where they're at.
Yeah, so you talk about YouTube and the just massive amount of content on that huge site. And it just makes me think that video has never been more accessible, but also like never more complicated because there's so many new technologies, cheap but good cameras, audio equipment, and you've got the rise of social media influencer culture that's popularizing, these trendy video type things. What's your advice for somebody who's starting out in this space with creating video content for the first time, who kind of wants to keep things cost effective to see, how exactly this works with their practice?
Yeah, so as a video production professional, I'll always push for a higher quality video and audio production and files. But there are also lots of things you can do to quickly and cheaply improve your video quality right from the cell phone in your pocket. The first thing I would recommend is to record the video horizontally for display on YouTube and your website. Most functions for video still operate best in the horizontal format, and it's an easy way for your videos to appear more professional without costing you additional time or effort. The next thing I would recommend is buying a cheap tripod to hold the camera stable. We've all gotten more used to the hands-on aesthetic over the years with the spread of video cameras on cell phones, and it used to be a good way to display authenticity, but now it just feels ordinary and lacks the polish of more professional work. By buying a tripod that costs you less than $20, you can provide professional footage for years to come. Lastly, I'll mention listening and looking at the environment around you before you film. Is there loud ventilation running that competes with your subject? Is there music or people talking in the background? Is the setting clear of distractions and professional looking? A poorly placed book title like The Idiot's Guide to Plastic Surgery or a patient's chart, which actually violates HIPAA policy, can really make your practice look unprofessional. There's a lot more we could talk about, but I'll have to save that for another day.
I just have one more question, Andrew. We recently began working on audio advertising as a new lead source for our clients. What can you tell us about that process?
That's right, Alex. We've got a new platform for audio-based ads that lets us reach people on platforms such as Pandora, iHeartRadio, The Washington Post, TuneIn, and so many more. Running an audio ad is as simple as having a short conversation with your marketing specialist and setting a budget like you would with any of our other ad services. We can either work with you to record an ad in your own voice or hire a voice talent for you.
Well, Andrew, you've shared a lot of great information today, and I know you've got so much more to offer, especially for people just starting out with video or audio. Can you let our listeners know how to get in touch with you and start working on some of these types of projects?
Yeah, you can reach out to us to discuss video production, podcasting, and media ads at info@dlmconversion.com. That's info@dlmconversion.com.
It was good to hear from a few of our team members today who work hard to be creative and get results for our clients.
Yeah, our graphic designer, Josh, talks about how you really have to earn your inspiration by looking for it actively, not by necessarily, as some people might think, just staring out the window, waiting for it to strike. And Andrew showed us how even really popular media like videos, podcasts, as they're on the rise, and everybody's consuming these types of things every day, they still need to be optimized if they're going to be part of your marketing efforts to have the biggest impact for your practice.
I agree. I've had a great time today, and we'll be back soon to talk more about not just how to make videos, but what kind of videos to make and how they can fit into your practice's overall marketing strategy.
If you're interested in discussing design, video, or audio services with DLM, feel free to reach out to us at info@dlmconversion.com. That's info@dlmconversion.com. Have a great day.
Thanks for joining us on the Limelight podcast. We hope you learned something new today that adds value to your practice. Remember to talk to an expert about your specific situation before making decisions based on the information provided in this podcast. Digital Limelight Media LLC, its employees, partners, sponsors, and guests are not responsible for any action taken or not taken as a result of listening to this podcast. As always, we welcome your questions and encourage you to reach out about any of the services we offer at DLM. Have a great day.